Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarians.
Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians.
Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarians.
Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians.
What's up, everybody? Joining us from an undisclosed location in the world is Rodrigo Ferrari Nunes. How's it going, buddy? How you doing?
How's it going, man? Good.
Good to have you
Am
here.
am I
Say it again?
breaking off on the screen there, like in your video? Is it just on my system here?
I am seeing you kind of. It does remind me of like those like early 2000s webcam videos. It's a little bit of that going on.
I'm on a mirror here.
Oh, I think it's okay.
I'm live on my channel as well, so cool.
You look fine now. I think it just needed a second to get used to itself. Well, actually, while you're doing that, let me show people your channel. So, Rodrigo actually has a pretty interesting channel. A lot of you out there like his channel and have been paying attention to Stellium. You're a fan. So, shout out also to Stellium. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're interested in? I mean, I can see a lot of stuff analyzing Scott Kelly.
No, these are just clips that I'm commenting on in a manuscript, like in a book that I'm writing. So I just wanted to start putting. There's been a lot of censorship on my channel, so
right.
I started at one point. I started to just put promotional NASA videos from archival sources that you have to dig into to find some of these older 1980s, 1990s.
Shout out to Anomaly and Bryson for being
stuff.
shadow banned, right? That's shadow banned. Everybody shadow banned.
My channel is totally shadow banned. It's been since I made a video exposing the tricks of the Guardian news agency when they made a video about flat earthers, and I made an analysis, and on the same day that got a community strike and got banned. Within hours got banned. And
so that's one of the main reasons you've got this subscription system, so you can get the data right to the people directly.
Well, there's people that support my work, and we have the website up for that, and for keeping an archive. There's a bunch of presentations there. They're on our servers. They're not on YouTube or anywhere else. So that's the idea of having another kind of repository, because the censorship, they back censored me just recently with 2 community strikes, like within a month.
Wow.
For a conversation with Mark Knight, Wakey from 2018. They basically said that they had hate speech. They don't explain exactly where it was, what it is. They can do that for other kind of copyright flags that they have. So
I'm gonna go really quickly to Andreas Xirtus on Twitter, because that reminds me of today's big Andreas hot take, which was YouTube posted. Where did this go? It's on my front. YouTube posted, what is your biggest inspiration? Your biggest YouTube inspiration? Who's your biggest YouTube inspiration? So I posted, why would I tell you? You ban every inspirational person from your platform, right? I think this is pretty, it's funny, but it's true. You know what I mean? This is what's going on. They're trying to get rid of all the people that are making. And so what really, hate speech, I feel like they're telling us that everything we do is hate speech, but really, what is it? Because you're clearly a loving guy. You're talking about Tartaria. You're talking about the world research. What are you talking about? What is it? The thing that you're really what is it you're passionate about that you're trying to get out there?
Right now, I've been deconstructing what I call the colonial cosmology, studying it in more detail, the way that we've been pushed the system, the world system that we have, not just in terms of socioeconomic and political machinations and the ways that people have been mind control in general, but also the history of space, the history of the stage that we have for the masses. It's a religion of the stage. I call it the cosmology of the stage, because it is what it is the first, when they realized they could give you productions and pretend it is real, and people will believe it's real because it's propaganda. It's not just because it's propaganda, because some kind of massive what do we call? I'm arguing that has a lot to do with fiction, this kind of fantasy world that people want to hang on to. They found a way with science fiction itself, the promotion of science fiction in general, the idea of spaceship traveling to different space balls in the corners of the galaxy. Science, Star Wars that we grew up with. I grew up with Star Wars and all these other things, and Star
Right.
Trek, of course.
Star Wars, which is heavily based on Euro-colonialism taking over these.
Yeah, it's the Nazis, right? As the Nazis, as a
or
kind of
worse.
resistance.
Often it's worse than Nazis. Often it's literally the British people.
Yeah, that's not very different actually when you look at what they've done in Africa and other places, and the horrific.
I mean, Star Wars, Sand People, Tunisia. I mean, how racist? How clear do they? Yeah.
Right.
All right.
Sand People. It's totally ridiculous.
Walt Disney presents the Sand People musical. Yeah, that's gonna be fun.
What they do is it's kind of like a fantasy, just like a fantasy film, kind of like Lord of the Rings. The difference is that you travel from ball to ball in a spaceship, and
Right.
there's different cultures and these different. They represent kind of human cultures, but then
But the
they have,
centric one, Coruscant, is very British, and they're very bureaucratic. Say, the center, in the
Right.
center of the inner party, right? I mean, I think that's interesting because have you heard of Ward Churchill? Do you know who Ward Churchill is? He's a famous Native American psychologist, researcher, sociologist, anthropologist. He's been on every at one point. What you were saying was very what they would call progressive left. It was at a certain point to say, hey, this is we have a lens that we're using that we should check out. Where did we get this lens? Why are we using a lens we learned from Jesuits in France in the 1800s when they were beating altar boys? Why is that the way we're looking at things still? Maybe that's Eurocentric. Maybe that's some kind of other centric. But it's definitely not seeing the holistic picture. And maybe we should look at the native perspectives. Maybe we should see what they remember. Maybe we should look at our history.
It's a very important book I've been looking at in my streams in the past. It's by a guy called Baron de la Hontan, and it's from the 1600s. It's called Description of North America, Travels Through North America of Baron la Hontan. It's a French book, and in this book he has a conversation with this native that is styled in the book as Adario. So it's a conversation with Adario inside La Hontan's Travels to North America. Is a 2-volume book you find in archive.org, and it was originally published in the 1600s.
Is this wrong? This is the wrong one. Travels Through North America, Bernard?
No. There's a bunch of these, but the one is La Hontan, Lahontan. Yeah, Tan, A-N at the end.
Sorry.
And it should be early 1700s. La Hontan, Louis Armand Baron, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah,
and so from 1666, born in the year of the fire. Okay. And he talks to a bunch of Algonquins. And so this differentiates his work from those of the Jesuits. That's very interesting.
Yes, well, absolutely. What happens is that in his conversation with Adario inside that book, when this is published in France, it sparked essentially the so-called Enlightenment. So the French philosophers, people like Voltaire and others, and Montesquieu, they were inspired by this, and in the critique of Adario, the critique of Western civilization, essentially, which comes from this indigenous man who was an actual person called Candiaronc. He was a Huron, sort of intellectual, I guess, or someone who could argue, and who traveled to Europe and who knew the customs of the French. What is amazing in this is that it has, at one point, when he's critiquing French society, Adario says that when he went to France, he saw that the doctors were coming in and poisoning people and killing 2/3 of the population, and nobody was saying anything. He makes the most scathing critique of Western civilization that existed at the time for Western minds, and so it sparked this Enlightenment discussions around the the nature of the state and other critiques.
Just going to throw this in there so that YouTube doesn't take us down. As long as YouTube remembers that syphilis blankets existed, all right? Just so we're not the only ones talking about this, okay? All right.
But he criticizes all sorts of religious ideas, even from the Jesuits, the way that they were doing things, and of course the Inquisition was already at the time, around for a while, and it's deeply connected with the Jesuits.
So this is really quickly. We're looking at Jesuit here, and a lot of the time you'll see the FS thing, where the S is used, an F is used as an S. So it's like the Hefe, kind of the Hefuit. It's almost like the Hefe, which is the bosses, which is kind of interesting also.
It's a type of the time that is common even in Portuguese. It's very different, but yeah. That's from and this is a translation, right? The English translation from the French originals, and it's way ahead somewhere. I think in the second volume that he's describing the beliefs of the Huron, and this is Adario makes the claim that money is the root of all evils, for example, which is well known. Now comes from this book, from the critique of that the Indigenous guy makes. So he's arguing, somebody who's arguing the position of Westerners, so to speak, and he questions many doctrines, religious doctrines, and I think it's amazing.
Wow. And so this book, I mean, we don't hear nearly as much about this as we do about the Jesuit works, but do you think it's because he wrote such a scathing review of the European colonial movement, or?
I don't know. I heard about it because of another book that was recommended to me by a couple of anthropologists. It's called The Dawn of Everything by David Graeber and David Wengrow. And that book
is that beaver.
It's more of like an archaeology book, but they're arguing, which is the essential argument of the book, is that they can prove it with archaeology, that we did not have this progression from hunter-gatherers into agriculturalists, sedentary people becoming sedentary, and then creating the state and this kind of evolution that is supposed to be this kind of human evolution idea, that the state is the pinnacle of social evolution or human evolution, for instance, which is quite silly. They showed the contrary, that people did not want to become agriculturalists. So they realized it was a lot of work, that they could forage, they could do different arrangements. They could also live in cities and not have states set up and be highly organized and not follow orders from others. So the critique of Adario is essentially that money is the root of all the evils, because he could see that with money, you could force anybody to do something they did not want to do. And that was against freedom. And they did not want to touch money. So they rejected money, knowing what it was because of what it did. They did not want to have anything to do with it. So I think it's quite interesting. But now today's world is almost impossible not to think about money.
There's a good to understand. Is there any mention of cities or anything? Because often, natives in North America, we imagine, living in a teepee maybe. But is there actual reference in terms of quote unquote natives, whatever this may be exactly, already living in cities, or I don't know, any mention of
cities in the Western sense? Cities.
Yeah, I mean, because the question is always, when were all of the buildings built in America and elsewhere? Well,
if you think of Tenochtitlan, which is the city of the Aztecs, which was there in the 1600s, 1500s, 1600s, and before, these are urban centers, right? These had been around for a while, and that one was destroyed. And still, you can find. I mean, the whole place is under the city of Mexico, but there's still Teotihuacan to the north. There's many other places that have.
Anasazi, right?
I've been there. That looks like Mesa Verde.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's very similar along the coast of Iberia and in Portugal and Spain. There's a bunch of these as well.
Yeah.
And yet, here, what's up? These people, where did they go? The Anasazi. Weird name, too, Anasazi. It does sound like a lot of other
But you
things.
do have, I mean, do you know about residential schools in Canada and the
Right.
States? Yeah, that's been also horrific. And I know I spoke with a survivor. I lived in a community northwest of Canada in
Wow.
British Columbia. And I spoke with somebody who went to one of the schools, which is the school where I think the Queen of England with Prince Philip made a visit and children disappeared. Yeah, there's this guy called Kevin Annett. Do you know him?
Kevin Annett. I don't.
Yeah, he's the priest. He was an Anglican priest who started giving voice to local indigenous people, who then started talking about their
Oh, yeah.
experiences in residential schools. And he was excommunicated. And he's the only person who's been talking about this before, from the murders in the residential schools. And then only finally in the last couple of years that they started coming in with the ground penetrating radar and finding a bunch of bones everywhere.
Yeah, it's not a lot of question at this point what happened to so many of the natives. I mean, we know, and people wonder about even things like scalping, right? For instance, apparently scalping was originally something Europeans did that natives learned about. It wasn't even originally an American, native thing.
I mean, it's very complicated, the whole history of the fur trade and the effects that it had. And we kind of underestimate the power of these Western Indies companies and the Dutch and the others that were around, the British and the Dutch and the French and the Portuguese, battling for hundreds of years in the oceans of the world and dominating people until they got kicked out, depending on the case, right? But yeah, we're still under their thumb. It's kind of cold here. So
It's terrible. I mean, all these people that have been forced to assimilate or die, and then along the way, a lot of the time, are sterilized, so that they're able to do is really play a role in the society that's developing around them and replacing their world, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is what people normally already are in that position, right?
I mean, so go ahead.
No, just the state itself, it's being a fiction, is the one thing that brings everyone down. Like, in general, it's something that shouldn't really exist the way it does. It's a huge waste of time. Just imagine the amount of how much more economy you would have if you didn't have to deal with it.
One of the things we were looking at was like the Carolina Bays and a number of these places that are above what have been found in LiDAR that look like former settlements that have been completely wiped away. And it's interesting because you look at places like, for instance, Salt Lake City, construction, for instance, and you can see they have all the stones everywhere. It's just that they basically have been knocked over, or they're all wiped around everywhere, and then they have to. It's almost as if there is a bunch of broken buildings already that they have to rebuild, perhaps, because they've been knocked down. Something has happened, and then so you were talking about Canada, and I wish I could find.
Well, I have pictures from my great grandfather who lived in Canada in 1905. My great uncle was born in Vancouver in 1910, I think. So we do have some stuff from I think the World's Fair in San Francisco he attended.
Wow. I mean, it's crazy. 1910, you have cars and everything, electric cars in the entire world that's got better things than we have now in a lot of cases. Electric fax, newspapers, telegram lines, everything's set up, free energy, cable car lines, rails in the streets. Totally clean looking here. I mean, it's been cleaned anyway. But this idea that at one point, we Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson, they're talking about maybe there's a point where a bunch of ice is
Well, they
blown
decided,
off
I mean, they
volcanoes.
messed up. The 19th century could have gone in a completely different direction. It just basically got sidetracked and taken over, not only by the financial system, but the growth of the kind of corporate industry that we have that basically enslaved the whole rest of the world. As you see,
Yeah.
it was, seems that people had better quality of life in some way or another. People are definitely more educated. It seems to me, at least from the works that you read, the kind of stuff that people were reading in the 19th century. But you also had a lot of bullshit, like in the 19th century, in the end of the 19th century, Darwin and others, like a lot of bullshit science.
There's a lot of focus on the Aztecs. The Aztecs are a very recent development. They're a post.
All these peoples go back thousands and thousands of years according to their own chronology. Like what people don't consider is the native cosmology. Yeah, Olmecs are supposed to be the oldest.
Right. Well, the Aztecs say that they are conquerors, right? So what happens is you've got several groups that are conquered, and the final warriors that make it. And what they do is they pit the other groups against each other, and then they fight whoever survives that, and then they sacrifice people. So this is all coming after a reset when a bunch of the civilization has collapsed, and maybe they've got 200 years or something of no electricity, or most of the civilization's in ruins or something before it's getting
there's
conquered.
Definitely something that happens, and that indigenous people remember. When I went into the north, that we had a kind of conversation from an elder that came out and started speaking. The professor, who turns out to be a Marxist, was a Marxist, like this kind of professed Marxist, so very materialistic. He told us to basically disregard what the guy was talking about, which was basically what happened during the flood. And it was his story about them having to rebuild after a great flood, and also going into these internative conferences where they talk to other indigenous peoples from, say, Samoa and South America. And then they realize that they have similar words that have a lot to do with the time of the flood.
Right.
When they had to use their canoes, it got dispersed, and that they had some kind of common root. And resets, in terms of resets, there's many different traditions talking about raptures, even inversions, and the world goes upside down and gets inverted. There's all kinds of stories. But shamanic religions, they all have the same kind of construction of a world, which is almost kind of like a womb that has a navel in the North Pole that has nothing to do with spinning balls.
We're not allowed to go, right?
Well, they go through it, right? And in some traditions, at least that's what they say, that they go through it and they go above it and they come under it.
I just mean we are not allowed to go there by default. That's what I'm just saying.
Well, as human beings, even in the Mahabharata, for instance, when they start conquering the whole world, the different Pandavas, they go around to the different directions, and they go conquering all the land in the whole world, as they claim it. Arjuna goes north, and when he gets to this one place, he's not allowed to go, and he doesn't go in, he doesn't try to conquer them, he just shuts up, and they say, no mortal can come through here. They give him some gems, and he goes back. He doesn't cross it. In Plato, also, you have this in the final chapter of the Republic. There's a account of this soldier who had a near-death experience. And the idea is that he goes into the afterlife and he watches as people start choosing their new lives, and as they get judged as well, to see if they go to heaven, if they go back to earth, if they sent to hell, in this where they have to pay 10 times for their acts of injustice. And in that too, there's some kind of portal but their souls have to approach if they're going to go into this transition zone that can get them a new life. And if they're in hell and they start to approach and they start going up, if they're not in the right frequency, the thing doesn't let them through. It starts rumbling. It's an interesting description, but it's like a physical thing. And it's cool.
Can you say again, where is this from? Because I know about this from like Life Between Lives by Michael Newton, or Dolores Cannon is describing these in-between states through hypnosis and what people then say. But what you're mentioning is from a book or from an account?
Well, like Plato's Republic is like the most famous.
Okay, there, right. Okay, sorry, I just fluked on what you.
Yeah, in the Republic, in the very last chapter of the Republic,
I wasn't able to get through it. Maybe that's why it was.
Yeah, if you get a translation and you go to the very last story that appears, is the story of this guy called I think, who's a Pamphylian soldier, and they were getting ready to burn his body on a pyre, and they realize that he's not dead. And then he wakes up and he tells this whole elaborate story. But this is being told, I think Socrates is telling Glaucon this story. So it's already within the conversation that they have. So they have a conversation, and then Socrates recalls, so there's this guy, this is what happened to him. But then he gives this elaborate description of the judgment in the afterlife that he watched. There's also how people are choosing their lives. Some people are returning as animals as well. They chose to return as ego. I think he talks about Agamemnon returning as an eagle because of human suffering that he couldn't bear anymore. And then there's others that chose to come back as animals, and then people that chose to come back as people. And the lives are kind of spread in this on the ground somehow as kind of a simulacra or something that you look at and you see what's going to happen with that, and you choose I want this or that life. So they say that Odysseus chose very wisely a life of somebody who was just and lived out of their own labor, and then some guy chooses harshly or chooses to he was too eager, and he chooses to come back as a king. But then later he realizes that he's going to have to eat his own children. So he's horrified. So that's all in the same story.
What? Wow.
Yeah. But yeah, this is like, what, 2,500 years ago.
But because Saturn has to eat his kids, and it's like,
right.
You're wondering, why would Saturn ever do that? And now you're like, here I am eating my own kid. There's no, what's that, Norm Macdonald? There's no river long enough that don't bend. You know what I mean? Like, you're like, why would I ever be Saturn eating my kids? Well, now you have to get that dharma. That's that point. Have you seen Gail Tormo's new Pinocchio yet?
No, is it dark?
Yeah, of course. But it's awesome. I think, it's an important... I mean, come on. Disney's those dark already, so it's hard to differentiate with darkness. But it's really interesting and beautiful, right? This is like... I don't think... Is it really stop motion? I feel like it's fake, but it looks real. I'm not sure. But it is...
It looks like stop motion, but it's an animation, normal computer animation.
I don't know. At very least, I saw some things I thought must be digital masking, because if otherwise, this is the greatest stop motion ever made. I'll have to look into it, and it might be. That's probably the way. This is the way the world works.
The movement is like real movement.
Yeah, it's like 18 frames a second, and just like it's so perfect. You'll love it. But at the same time, the story. So what's come up recently? Yesterday, we were thinking about Simpsons. Bart Simpson sells his soul. You know what I'm talking about? That time he sells his soul. And when he sells his soul, then he ends up trying to get it back, and he can't. And he's all worried he's never going to get it, because his soul got sold to the comic book guy, and he can't get the money back and everything. And then his sister tells him, kind of in the Platonic tradition, that the soul is an accumulated thing. You don't just have a soul. You may have a little spark of soul, but really you have to like produce these actions over your life. It's a very Hellenistic portrayal, so that he has to develop a soul by doing deeds over his life, the fruits of his labor, very Solomonic. And this is very Pinocchio as well, to become a real person, to ascend into what it means to be a person or a human. It actually requires them to perform these mitzvahs.
just because you're mentioning Pinocchio, isn't that also the story with the island where they bring all the boys?
Yeah. They have the Pleasure Island or whatever.
Right.
So
The
creepy.
human trafficking
Exactly,
subtext.
like this is everywhere. And the one I mentioned briefly, because these stories with the residential schools was in early 1900s, right? Along those
No,
lines.
that goes all the way to the 80s. And
All right, because I just recently heard a similar story from Soviet Yugoslavia, that apparently they had a loophole as to how get babies birthed and give all the documentation to their parents, but not actually register them as a citizen, so that then, you know, if required or whatever, these children could simply vanish. And there
Hmm.
was
oh
at least
god,
one first-hand case. This was first-hand, that there was, medical procedure, extraction of, how do you call it, bone marrow, stuff like this. And then
yeah,
potentially
it
the
is
only
horrible.
thing, and this is another thing I almost want to bring up. I mean, it's a very meta thing, the idea of violence, and I'm generally totally, I should say, against violence. It's the last resort, ideally
I don't
much
care
higher.
who here disagrees with me. I'm against violence. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah, no, ideally higher solutions can be found. But the point is, because in this particular story, the idea why this particular individual didn't get, kidnapped or something, may have been in this case because, let's just say, the parent was known for being maybe not the most kind individual, or maybe a little bit crazy even, so that whoever would
That's
have
the kind of
thought
Slavic
about.
parent you want.
Exactly. So this may have been a protection, actually. And I was just wondering this on a meta level, with terms of all the, Babylon system and so on. Ideally, violence should never be necessary. But I'm also thinking that, as this is a basic idea of civilization, isn't it also like a protection racket mechanism for the system? Because they can go around oppressing you with economy and legal system. So there, anyways, you have no recourse. And then if they know for a fact, and we're not even talking about killing anybody or whatever, but if you know for a fact they're not even going to slap you in your face so that the lowly bureaucrat gets scared, and doesn't overreach because he knows, oh, maybe I'm going to get a, slap in my face or something, that this is a huge resource saving mechanism for Babylon in a way. Can you kind of get what I'm saying? So that this idea that they know that most Westerners, for example, are too docile to do anything. But with this, let's say, crazy Slavic guy, they're afraid and they back off. You see what I'm saying? Maybe
Yeah,
it's only
what
in
a
terms of
stereotype.
readiness or something. I don't know, but
Yeah, I think docility, and this comes up over and over again, is that society is to be civilized is to be passive and to be submissive.
maybe that's the
And
thing. Passive and submissive. That's a more general theme. Yeah.
docile's nice. I
Yeah,
like
I
docile as a
think
word.
a lot of it has to do with entertainment. Like there's society of entertainment, which is locked onto productions, endless productions, and more disconnected from actual life. And it drives people away from each other into these virtual worlds, to fantasy, which is much more difficult than to, and where the stage then starts by having a massive stage, takes over everybody's mind, and people just, kind of like, it's a discussion of money that exists because people believe it and they can take it and they can do things
I reduced
for
my
money.
microphone volume. Is that better? Someone said my mic was too high.
Seemed fine to me, but should be
It's
good.
fine.
Okay. All right. Cool.
But yeah, how can we? I don't know if we can actually solve it. This is the what's messed up. We come into this world that puts everyone up against each other.
The Eloi in the
And
time machine just bred to be submissive. I think this is they're pointing out this is where it goes. Eventually, world peace leads to, and in the show, like everyone's just cattle. Somebody swims and falls into the river, and then nobody helps. They just look at her, right?
oh god, okay. What is this called?
The Time Machine. It's based on H.G.
I
Wells'
think I've
book.
seen this.
Basically, what happens is he shows up in the far future and he finds that there's a civilization after a reset, and there's two castes. There's the above ground and the below ground. The below ground were able to survive the nuclear fallout and everything. They had oxygen producing factories, but they turned into these blue meanies that eat people. And the people they eat are the Eloi. They're the above humans. who are blonde and they're cultivated and they every
this
day they
is
wake up there's fruit for them ready to go, but then they eat them when they're 20.
yeah. I mean, this is good fantasies that mix evolution, biology, evolution, and capacity, like human capacity, with something that's biological and that can be bred. That you get these changes that we've never seen, like when it comes to so-called evolution, right? You have trilobites that look the same no matter how far back you go. There's some creatures that they admit don't apparently don't change for hundreds of millions of years, right? But in science fiction, you can get all kinds of different combinations by just making them up. But the fact, I mean, that what I think is going on, that people get zombified, if you will, is through education, so-called education propaganda, but also tons of inputs from popular media that is just surrounding them. How can you escape, superhero stories? And when you grow up in this world, for instance, and superheroes are the ultimate transhuman, eugenic embodiment of some kind of impossible fantasy, and it keeps going. It has no end to how many superheroes you can make, and with extra capacity that can be better than everybody else, and that can, then kill each other. And there's space for the imagination.
There's
Is
infinite
wild.
space, Rodrigo.
Infinite space. Yeah, that's right. And with infinite space in your mind, and the cosmology of infinite, it's expanding space, then makes people feel completely lost, I think, in some kind of deeper sense, because it's not what's around us. When you go around and you start looking at the world, you don't have some kind of infinite light years of star travel. That doesn't exist. That's another fiction. Even if you, so what I'm trying to do with my work is explain how that works through looking even into astronomy, right? The claims that they make, but they're also their academic literature, which is just actually speaks for itself. It's just simulation with math. They play with math and simulations and computers, and that's it. And they give you cartoons, and people are happier and happier with dumber and dumber shit. It's the Artemis crap. It's been so
Maybe we
bad.
can look at some stuff. The production quality has really gone down, I think. I just want to point out one thing, or ask one thing. Could it also be that this is a diversion, not only from, let's say, what's really going on and what the real issues are, and our, let's say, true history and position in time, space, and in society, but also more specifically that we don't know what's on the floor of the oceans, or it's banned to go there. We haven't properly mapped the planet, and Google Earth is not giving a proper representation, so that this kind of exploratory impulse maybe can be diverted into a fictional realm, rather than everyone saying, well, and I really want to know, let's go. I'm not interested in military lockdown, so.
Yeah, the first thing is it's not a planet that's floating, spinning in space, that moves, and with the speeds that they say that's very easy to figure out. I think, at least that's one of the things I got. Now, why is it? What's going on at the limits? Why do they create a mosaic of Antarctica that's completely ridiculous, even in the academic literature? If you look at Google Earth at Antarctica,
that shape matters. It's like there's a math. Somebody did a thing on that, the golden ratio, and like there's a bunch of specific numbers from all the pyramids in Antarctica that make these specific golden ratios that do phi, and that's the shape. It's like all of these places and the distance from them from each pyramid.
Antarctica as a rim. Who says that?
The reason the Google shape they make Antarctica look the way it does is because there's it's a sacred geometry joke about the pyramids there. Right. I think most of the things we're seeing are probably projections, like maybe we are existing in a projection. Do you think we're living in a holographic projection, or do you think we're on the back of a turtle?
I've read the books. I read the Talbot I read the Talbot book on holographic kind of universe. I don't know. I think that when you look into ancient knowledge about what is out there in terms of ancient, in my at least what I've been able to look at, you see that there is something which is real and something in the dream world where we go to at night when we sleep. We live in some other realm as well. We're not just something that comes out of a particle that turns into a body. We're basically locked in the body. I don't know what is out there. We don't know what is out there. If it looks like an eye, if it is, a circle, if it is, we know it's not a ball. We know it's not spinning. It cannot be. Anything that spins would produce centrifugal motion or forces, and you don't feel it anywhere on the earth. And no matter how much you travel back and forth in any direction, there you go.
So if we're all quantum entangled, then that means, that's, to me, you look at some of this art, the further back you go, especially, right? Because this is where the art gets a little weird. But if you go back to Egyptian stuff, you get this idea. Granted, all of these are, you kind of see this idea of milieu, right? Which is the sphere is representing milieu. It's like there's a connection of spaces. There's the transcendental, celestial. There's the existential.
There's a celestial
corporeal
sphere, right? That has a fixed stars.
But you could look at it also like moves. It's a goddess and it's a guy. Like these are personifications as well. Right, it's more that they're all one thing that are existing, and it's the only way. Like whereas quantum entanglement, the space is here. It's all part of this place.
The Chinese, they went far beyond what anybody else seems to have done, as far as I know, in their description of the Earth as a plane, and with the idea of a firmament. And it's there's a book that I can recommend on. It's like When the Earth Was Flat by a guy called Kupri. It's like Couprie. IE.
Oh yeah.
This one is interesting because he's a baller, and at the end he produces a couple of arguments to try to say that the Earth must be a ball somehow, but he makes a good comparison between the Egyptian and the Greek system. The Greek system was far behind what the Chinese achieved, and they were able to map not just the land, but the correspondences in the sky and different constellations, and they have these pretty complex maps. And a lot of people don't read. This is some of the maps that have correspondences in the sky, but people don't read. There's many texts from astronomers from the 10th century and beyond when they're describing the firmament and actually measuring things and so on. But we don't read that stuff. It's a bit beyond our realm. You see in the I Ching, for instance, that the understanding behind the book is flat Earth. There's a firmament. It comes up when you read it. There's waters above and waters below.
Right, it's flat universe, but you think that it means above and below, as above and so below. Like, is space?
No, that, for instance, you mentioned quantum entanglement, right? That's just one idea. Like, you have to remember that quantum is a theory that comes out of atomic theory, which is pure mathematics. You cannot see atoms. You can do things with chemistry, and the assumption can make chemical reactions. We cannot really see the atom, and you cannot see subatomic particles. But you can make up a lot of math about this stuff and try to claim that you understand how subatomic particles would be.
I like meta entanglement. Meta entanglement tries to grab the good ideas from entanglement and get rid of quantum, because quantum is kind of a problem.
I think it is an old idea, guys. Like, it is just a notion that everyone is somehow connected, that we're part of. We have a connection with God. Say, I don't know. The Hindu ideas. God lives in your heart is like a flame in your heart. You can see that you have that in the Buddhist idea as well. And you can say we're all entangled in this universe, a vast universe. The problem with the quantum entanglement is that they make claims about some particle or something in the confines of the universe having a connection with something right here, that they can somehow make that claim and say that it's feasible. But it supports sort of that expanding universe, Big Bang kind of cosmology. But it draws on this notion of connectedness, of people feeling connected, feeling like they're part of something. If that's what you say, because there must be something about us, right? Being all here in this place with all this crap going on around us, that most
WP
people.
Gen Lighten for Truth says, I apologize, I do not believe in Darwin's theory, but I do believe that mankind is about to go through a shift that's never been done before. Which theory? Do you mean like that endangered species taste good? Because that part of Darwin's theory is true.
What the fuck? That's funny. I mean, you want me to talk about the problems with Darwinian theory?
I mean, anything you can go on, whatever. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. You can keep going on quantum. Or actually on entanglement and the connections that we have that's
And
real.
I just want to insert, or just to differentiate, because the point that would still remain valid is the idea. I think they even measured this with random number generators and stuff. That just like you said, humans do have some seemingly spooky action at a supposed distance effect on their reality. But of course, that the way they frame it in the modern science is quite lacking. Is that what you're saying, basically? Or they try to, of course, fit it into their framework and their other maybe brainwashed belief systems?
Well, I don't know. I see there's people who seem to be able to read a book that's somebody else is holding in the same room. There's all kinds of stuff that people seem able to do that seem to break what's expected.
Or one first-hand example is children learning to see or to read and see colors being completely blindfolded. This is easier when they're young, but this is being trained on the regular. So this is happening, which is pretty cool, I think. So everyone get your children to learn, to see like this, It's pretty nice. However that works.
I've done some kind of meditation where you start seeing things with your eyes closed and stuff. So we all have this capacity to try to get our consciousness to be awake during the dream state, where things are actually happening as well, because we're not just a physical body. But this is in very many traditions that make that claim. Now, why do we need a quantum entanglement concept? I don't know, but it's kind of what we see with modern physics is the attempt to generate some ideas that then try to tag them onto older kind of religious notions, because there's a deep connection between sort of religious doctrines and science itself, because science is
Jesuit science, no?
Yes, because science is a kind of.
I don't know what this means. If the Earth was flat,
forecasting.
seeds wouldn't know which way to grow. I don't get it, but I want it on a shirt.
Yeah, they grow towards the sun.
I didn't get it. I don't know.
What I
But
mean,
I'm sorry. The
if
Jesuits.
it's not flat, today, we know. If it's a ball, then they grow. I don't know.
Like the dirt and the sunlight. It seems. Yeah. All right. Go ahead. Jesuits.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to be quite skeptical of scientific terminology, especially what comes out and becomes promoted in kind of popular media, and that gets it's a way what it is, like in physics and other forms of, not all physics is mathematics, right? Astrophysics, it is in general. It's a form of art that has to do with mathematics and simulations and computers. It has nothing to do with the world around us. We can prove that the stars are in front of sprites. When you look at sprites, and I've made a video about this, and I showed that many times. You can just look at videos from sprites, and you will see that not the video game sprites, right? I don't know why they show that, but sometimes they show that.
You know why? They don't want you to actually see the real thing.
All terminology is colonized, I can tell you. Colonialized.
Well, the way that you don't do that is by inventing terminology that then you define what the definition should be. because everybody needs, for communication, we need some form of terminology, or you don't say anything.
I love how every picture is openly fake about space. This is nice.
This is so much of it. It's so fake. But there's a channel called Pecos Henk, and he's the one that I've been looking at. NASA tries to monopolize. We look at my channel once that NASA has some kind of program where they say they're studying sprites and they collect them for people to use in their research, but they give you pixelated horrible images and not the actual thing. Pecos Henk has some really good videos on sprites, and if you just look at his videos, actually, he films a sprite that's over almost 500 kilometers away from the ground in Texas, and it's in Florida somewhere. Yeah, the red sprite, that one on top, and the both of these are the best videos. And what you see is that when the sprite happens, the stars, there's some stars that seem to be in front of the sprites. They don't even move. You don't have a pixel change as the sprite explodes, which is billions of volts at 100 kilometers high, somewhere far on top of the storm over there. But the stars that's supposed to be behind, obviously, the sprites, some of them are in front of them, and it appears and it happens again and again and again.
Wow, like plasma.
Yeah, I mean, this phenomena has not even been studied at all. It's considered to be, it's only been documented since the 80s or something. People didn't even know it existed. But what happens is that you can clearly see when you analyze these videos that some stars are completely unaffected by the entire sprite, and they just seem to be hovering in front of it.
Do you think this has always been this way, or is do you think that things are changing? Do you think they've closed this in a box with a fake sky?
I don't know. I tend to think that this is some kind of, I don't know where it come and what it really is. I know it's not what they show us, and it has nothing to do with science fiction and traveling in hyperspeed. And there's something to it. The sprites also, for many flat earthers, the sprites seem to look. They have a bunch of stars in front of it. Are unaffected by
I
it.
see some weird, almost sacred geometric sigil shapes in here.
Yeah, you see a lot when you see, if you find what is really strange about sprites, that one of my videos, we were looking at some of the really high speed videos from it, which are very rare to find, that show it kind of flowing, and it looks like there is some 3D structure. It's really bizarre when you look at it a lot. You're like, what the heck is going on? It's almost like it's clinging against some kind of scaffolding. It's very weird, man.
So what do you think it is? You think it's what do you think it is?
I would just want to ask, wouldn't this be a good point to bring up the question of the dome and the firmament referenced in many, I guess, scriptures, and also, strangely enough, on the graveyard stone of Werner von Braun? He's referencing this one.
Right.
And supposedly there was Operation Dominic and another one, which I forgot the name, where they supposedly, Fishbowl, right? Maybe I learned this from you, actually, where they apparently, sent their heavy payload and it didn't go so well. So
yeah, they tried to break through something, but they couldn't go through it. It's just that's what seemed to have happened at that time with their so-called nuclear weapons. So they tried to explode them high up in the so-called glass ceiling. So it seems to be the case. There's not a lot of, it's not very clear how exactly that works. If this firmament is something really hard, if it's got openings. In the Mahabharata, there's cities, they're placed in the firmament, at the firmament. And there's underwater cities as well in the descriptions of they find in there. And
underwater in the sky or underwater in our oceans?
underwater in our oceans, but also in the firmament somewhere, like encrusted in the firmament or attached to it. There's descriptions of that, and there's also when Arjuna goes up to Indra's world, he goes into a star when he ascends and spends, I think, years, 12 years, I forget, not 12 years, several years. I don't know, I don't remember exactly. But he, in the Mahabharata, the description is that he goes into a star. He starts to meditate and do fasting and eat less and less and go higher and higher and up a mountain, finds a tree, and from that tree, when he's basically just bones and flesh and bones, and he goes up to Indra's world and lives there, and that's where he's cursed, because it's one of the funny stories of the Mahabharata, because one of his Indra tells one of the ladies there to go have it with Arjuna and to try to seduce him, to just do it with him because he's going to be there. And he rejects her. He says, "You're like my granny. I can't do you. I'm not going to do it." And she says, "So you're going to live like a eunuch." And she curses him to live like a eunuch for a year. And that's what happens when he comes back to Earth, that he's forced into, they're in the exile period. I don't know if you know much about Mahabharata, but there's an exile of the Pandavas. And in the final year of the exile, he has to live in disguise without being noticed. And he lives as a eunuch. He becomes a eunuch, and he lives with the girls of the palace and dancing and singing and teaching them things like this before he he comes out again after. But yeah, it's just it's quite an interesting story. But yeah, description
interesting. It reminds me of like Joseph in the Bible, also, right? He had to live as a eunuch and refused to do the wife of his boss.
Oh yeah, I didn't know that there was a correspondence there. I know that for instance, the death of Krishna is similar to the death of Achilles with the heel, with the
right.
The arrow on the heel. And there's just some other things. There's some relationships between the Mahabharata and the Homer's work. The return of Odysseus home, when he finds Penelope and the suitors, that he has to shoot the arrow through through a bunch of other arrows to prove that he is Odysseus, because the suitors are trying to throw arrows through these rings of arrows, right? And they couldn't do it. He comes in disguise, pretending to be a bum, and does it, and then kills them, and so on. It's very similar to the I forget the name of the ceremony, but something similar that happens a lot in the Mahabharata when a woman is gonna go for marriage. There's a competition, and the suitors all come in, and they have to try to shoot. It's more difficult. It's like a moving, spinning target, and very high up with a bow that most people couldn't pick around. But Arjuna does exactly the same to win the hand of his wife. He comes in disguise, and he pulls the arrow and the bow, and does it. So there's these connections, but they're different stories. The Mahabharata is very complex, much more complex than what people have been led to believe, if they even believe it, if they even heard of it, because you will go through, most people in the Western education system, they don't get access to these stories, or they don't study them, or they consider them some kind of folklore. But there's much more to it, because there's all these discussions of Dharma, which is the superior, or what they call supreme intelligence, as the welfare of all beings. They have this discussion: what is the right thing to do, right? And Dharma also is a custom. So particular peoples may have a particular kind of Dharma that they follow, and sometimes it means the right way of acting, but it may depend on the condition how you're born. So, but there's nothing in Western spiritualism for all these Blavatskys and all these other scam artists from the 19th century that even gets close to theosophy, even gets close to what's going on with the Indian, the actual Sanskrit literature that they are pretending to represent.
Well, what do you think about the fact that they're trying? I mean, so the fact that these groups in the 19th century, I mean, a lot of them, they were called satanic groups, but some of them were trying to, I mean, a lot of them that were like the Grand Tibetan Lodge or the Old Lodge of the Orient, or these groups that were trying to study the Veda.
They're based on Jesuit setup with the Masons set up, this kind of notion of an order that has degrees they have to pay for, and then you get initiated and you get given special instruction. So it's they found a formula. They look at some, it doesn't, it's very weird, because when you read Blavatsky later, you realize what my problem is with it. If it was what you're saying, like these people are collecting all these texts from the Hindu tradition in Sanskrit, and they're translating them, and they're putting them out to the public and letting people run with it. But that's not what it is. Blavatsky plagiarized material. She stole from different works, for hundreds of different works, exactly what the library was. She had a library of 100 or so books, and she plagiarized it to create her book, which was a mess, and was later edited by Alice Bailey. And it was caught by people at the time that they're plagiarizing and lying, inventing, and they have the Lucis Trust, their Lucifer thing that they talk about. Now it's become kind of business model. They have Steiner also has the same thing. Steiner is quite famous among truthers as well, but he's a liar. Like, he has the whole book on the history of Atlantis, and Lemuria. It's one of the most ridiculous pieces of fiction that I've ever seen. It's and he claims that he's getting it in the Akashic records, which is basically his invention of a place that allegedly contains all the knowledge, everything that has ever happened, and that some mystic can go and read it and describe it. But he doesn't do it. He goes all around the block and creates a bunch of excuses for his mistakes and stuff, and he's basically making shit up in order to get people to get into their cult, to believe that they're becoming ascended masters, that they're having contact with these, which Blavatsky invented this master, Kutumi. She basically made him up as a character. And she came up with this, invented this whole tradition that then a lot of Americans, mystics, so-called mystics, started trying to emulate. They realized that they could get cults, they could get a following of people who want to be initiated, who want to get closer to God or something. They may have good reasons to be doing it, but the whole mythology is fake. And when you read, it's a construction. It's like a club that with the little degree. It's like Scientology. It's the same kind of scam. Scientology is more extreme because there's the aggressive kind of promotional campaigning, very American kind of style that they have, but it's very similar. It's based on lore created by one particular person who's supposed to be some kind of incarnation of some kind of god.
Who is dreamy and handsome, and we love you, Miscavige, and we would never say anything other than that we love you. No, I'm just kidding. Don't sue us.
Who is it? Oh, yeah. So yeah, cults. People somehow they want to be dependent on some kind of special. It's the spirit that comes and gives the message. That's really the one they have to hear. You cannot find out on your own. Or and if you start reading, if you read in the Mahabharata, for instance, it's so complex. There's people, there's evil, there's good things, there's bad things happening, there's wars happening. But there's and the wisdom comes from there's many stories that happen and things that people say to one another, discussions that they have. And the idea is to build the character, like you're saying, building the soul without being locked into into a particular system that you have to affirm, otherwise you're going to be damned, uh, right? Because God loves everyone, right? That's the idea. But yeah, it's kind of funny,
I
actually.
freaking see it. Yeah, that's brutal.
That's really funny.
I also the Great Invocation. You know this, right? So you're talking about the Lucis Trust and the Lucis Trust and Alice Bailey,
Right.
Trees on White Magic, etc. And Foster Bailey. But then the Great Invocation, and I was looking at because the UN and their whole thing is that they were founded with the Lucis Trust's Great Invocation. That's the
Oh, really?
prayer that they did for the UN. And it was down here. They said, "Hey, we have an adapted version in 2000 that responds to the language sensitivities in a multicultural world." So I think I'm gonna read that version instead. But you can just imagine I'm talking about men when I say humans, I guess. From the
Right.
point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into human mind. Let light descend on
Very
earth.
Masonic, the light obsession with the light.
Yeah, Lucifer, right. From the point of love, because love, 93, Thelema. Within the heart of God, let love stream forth into human hearts. May the coming one, asterisk, and this asterisk is interesting because they're like many religions believe in a coming one, a world teacher, knowing him under such names as Lord Maitreya,
And of
Aman
course,
Mahdi, the Bodhisattva, and the Messiah, right?
yeah, and of course, that they tried to push Krishnamurti into that position.
That poor kid, yeah.
And
Do
he
you ever see that young
rejected-
Indiana Jones where Krishnamurti plays soccer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he rejected it here in the Netherlands, right? He told everybody, he came in the radio and he said, "I'm not anything what they're saying I am." But you know about Sai Baba as well.
Dude, it's so good. If you guys haven't watched the Young Indiana Jones where Krishnamurti plays soccer and teaches cricket to Indiana Jones, I mean,
I don't remember this.
they went there, dude. That's insane.
Wait, I need a restroom break for a second. So I'll be
Yeah,
back in
okay.
just-
One sec,
just
for
a-
sure. I'll finish this terrifying poem that is about the devil. So, and that's the point, the knowing names, because God's got like, who am I? Well, who asked you? And like, well, who am I supposed to say sent me? Like, well, I am that I am. Just shut up. That's what God usually says. And instead, they're like, well, this is Maitreya, and Messiah is like the last in a list of all of the things that this thing they're praying to is the coming one. All right, so yeah. They also talk about the Antichrist is coming, so let's just be clear. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide all little human wills, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center which we call the human race, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the doors where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. This is basically what they said to start the United Nations. I mean, their version said men instead of humans and etc. But all this other stuff, let love and light and Thelema kind of things, are still in the thing. And it's interesting because they have their own prayer room in the United Nations for that. I was just talking about the prayer room in the United Nations where they do this stuff, and then their connection to Thelema and to the Lucis Trust. And I was about to go into what's the one, the Baha'i,
really?
faith. They're the ones. So basically, anytime the UN,
I met some Baha'i when I went to do field work in Scotland.
interesting.
Some of the first people I met were Baha'i, and I went into a Baha'i party once where they were just eating and playing music, and they believe in this. They all religions together, right? There's something like this, and there's this guy.
All religions are underneath them. They think that every religion is part of Baha'i because Baha'i is the big one.
Right.
It's gnarly.
Yeah. What's the name of the guy? The guy's called Baha'i, right?
Right. And so he was in Israel, or what is now in Israel and Palestine. And so you're still supposed to go to do a Mecca to like Israel for them is part of the thing. And is it the 8-pointed star? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 9? What? 9? 3, 6, 9 star. 9 star. But they've got all these buildings which are just like hyper Masonic, old neoclassical. Some of them are even, I mean, just so ornate and amazing, and the sigil magic and stuff. And the way that it got to the West was William Randolph Hearst's mother converted. Phoebe Hearst was a member of the church and lived happily ever after until she died of the great influenza.
Huh.
But yeah, the Lotus Temple. They basically, anytime they're the Jedi. Anytime the United Nations now have Jesuit-esque priests interfering with local events, you've got some Africans here that are talking to different tribes. They'll bring in the Baha'i. The Baha'i are yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it's kind of like, it's what the Jesuits, that there's this basic proliferation of all these different orders that have very similar kinds of functions of herding and controlling through these kind of made up religious systems. So, I don't know. For me, I see things differently. I don't know. Probably you guys have your own path when you look at things. I try to especially pay attention to indigenous religions that people have no idea ever existed, to see what's through, what comes through, right? See if there's find some kind of answer for all these questions of existence and so on, which are why we're here.
Maybe one thing in terms of religions to differentiate. I'm just translating the conversation Andreas had with David recently, also speaking about the Quran. And what I only then noticed, because it's mentioned so often and it's common knowledge that in the Quran or in Islam even today, they say that Muhammad was a prophet, Jesus was a prophet, and who knows who else. But that in classical Islam, let's say, there is this idea of an equality of prophets, and also the idea that no human being is a particularly special son of God, which seems to be the contrivance of the modern Catholic Church, and is actually a type of, I would call it, Jesus supremacy programming, let's say, which puts like a wedge between whatever, Jesus and everybody else, or Christianity and Catholicism and everybody else. And only then I realized the issue I was having, because I was trying to read the Mahabharata or the Bhagavad Gita in the A.C. Prabhupada, or whatever his name is, the Krishna Society guy, a society for the, Andreas, you know which one I'm talking about?
Right, yeah.
The Krishna, the main big one, because this was one handed to me in California by some guy, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna check it out.
I saw
and
his
I always
body
had
stuffed
had
one
an
time.
issue in the commentary that it always seemed like there is a strange personification of Krishna and a strange differentiation made. And because for me, creation is made out of the creator itself, there is no real differentiation, there's only layers, and there is an equality inherent. And that also in the Krishna Society, in my interpretation of it, they also seem to introduce this, let's call it Krishna supremacy. And then thinking in a conspiratorial type of fashion, I'm like, maybe this is why this particular flavor of Hinduism or whatever got pushed, because it includes the same,
it's more radical,
like, strange personification supremacy idea. Can you relate to what I'm saying? Do you know what I'm talking about?
So one time I was in LA, and they carried his body. This is his tomb. His body is in this thing. Then they carry it through the streets.
What? His body is not decomposed?
No, I mean, they put it into a clay, like ceramic mold, so that he can just be there forever. It's kind of weird.
That is at odds with what you see in things like the Mahabharata, where people are burned in the pyres, right?
Right.
Exactly. The idea of idolizing an image of someone or likeness, it's very Jesuit, very Catholic.
Yeah.
The people in power, like when you see, for instance, the Masonic order, like wherever they go, they use the religious group from whatever group. It doesn't matter. They don't have to use the Bible. They can use the Quran. They can use whatever book, because you can twist things. You can set things in particular ways that will have the same kind of effect by reinterpreting the information or generating quote unquote knowledge that's authoritative, for that nobody can question, but that is actually not true, or that not actually accurate. Let's put it like that. It is a transformation of the actual whole thing. Like, so for instance, I'm not saying that's the case. If you get to the Bhagavad Gita and you start reading it, like you getting in a point, it's in a part of the Mahabharata where they're about to get started in a huge battle. The weight of the moment, you don't understand. You cannot understand what's actually going on, because you need the background for the Mahabharata before it gets to the Gita. Arjuna gets off the chariot and he decides that he's having trouble. He's going to have to fight his own family, and he says, "I'm not going to kill my own family." And then Krishna, who's his charioteer for different reasons, and comes out and gives this explanation, starts saying that nobody actually dies. So it's that nobody actually is dying. But it's I mean, this is one of the things, like it's interesting to try to read, to understand the whole story of the Pandavas, the Kurus and the Pandavas, I think. And I mean, this is, I see the comment. There is no, when you read these Vedic texts, I don't think they push a particular kind of religion. That's the other problem that we have. So in the world we have today, we have all these organized religions with a lot of power, but in the world that they're depicting, and the stories that they're not pushing that kind of organization that we have now.
Jellyfish machinist, same.
Yeah, there's different ways that supplants the kind of, we live in a society of people are dissatisfied and unhappy, so it creates the need for all these kind of therapies that have different faces and different combinations, and they're everywhere. But yeah, I was just kind of riffing on it.
To what extent also then these, especially if they're pushed, like this type of Krishna worship, let's say, is also like a fallback mechanism of the system, because none of the organized religions really teach you self-responsibility or your own intimate, immediate connection to the divine, because if they would be too transformative for the state cosmology, or however you want to put it.
I think it's interesting because like when you read these texts, at least for me, like Krishna and the other people that are around him, they are teaching through action. And there's many other characters that do things, they're just things, that take care of that it's like a moral story that tries to teach you how to behave in the best possible way, which is similar to how people see Jesus. Right, but I think some people argue that Jesus is also about some form of action, at some point. When he goes after the
flipping the tables,
flipping the tables, and so on. Right. So but are these characters complete? Do they do only the right things? Have they done? That's the idea. That's the mythology of.
Maybe a modern day reference. There is just now something released on Vice. I forgot the country now. Oh my God. But some country like hit with heavy inflation in South America, I believe. And they're literally now going in the banks with Molotov cocktails or something like this. Because they're like, we tried to argue legally for a year or 2 years or 3 years to get our own deposited money from the bank. And now they regularly start doing this and live streaming it. And it's a really, really crazy situation. It's
the banking system is fraudulent by and large, right? They use your money they lend money that they shouldn't be lending, and they create all these other things. The financial system is kind of the beast in a way that came in after the 19th century and in a way messed us up hardcore, especially with the informational kind of the monopoly over information, daily information that people tend to care for. People became hijacked. That's what I think. Like, if you say, is it a simulation? To some extent, it is this virtual reality, because you're being fed all these lines since you're born, and they're coming from the main, what is the mainstream media, which is an arm of the state and of other people who are behind the state. The state obviously is not just an entity. It is some kind of abstract entity that people fight over. They control through many different arms, especially corporate. Right, the state is part of the corporate world. Like it's how it operates.
Maybe because I recently had a discussion with someone who had a study with the European Space Agency with his project. I'm not going to define further now. And I brought forth some issues like, okay, why don't we have 4K live streams proper of the ISS and all these rockets? Why do we always get this bad 80 CGI? And why can't we explore Antarctica and all of this? And then he was kind of like saying, and I just want to know like your argument or perspective on this. He was like, yeah, well, but of course, you know, if the Americans would have faked the landing or something, the Russians would have said something for sure. So some people then still get stuck in this idea that there is real competition between states. There may be on some bureaucratic level, but there certainly is a level beyond that where there is, you know, some agreement, let's say. Yeah?
No, they're already collaborating way before that with their so-called space. It's never been a race. They did the Mir or whatever their stations. They already had the handshake in space. They got a Nobel Prize, a Peace Prize for the handshake.
I just meant that politically, sometimes there is an argument and maybe some movement in terms of competition.
I think that's staged. No, you're right.
Probably,
I mean, I think
yeah.
right. I think you're right. Yeah, of course. Like they have a front and they have a backstage. Like we only see in the front stage for most of the time. Of course, the Russians are the boogeyman, but then they hang around together and they do space together. They do all these because space promotes.
Well, if you have the right rings, you know, you're in the club.
Yeah. And all the Chris
I saw a good one the other day where someone took a sip
Russian.
of water on the space, or there was a cup of water that was just sitting there. That was really funny. It was like they just had everything else was fine, but there was just one cup of water off on the side that they forgot about. It's like, come on, bro, try harder.
There's so many issues with this stupid space station, like from the holes to appear on it.
What a creep, this guy.
Yeah, this guy is just, it's horrific. Him and his brother. And I mean, you've seen there's a famous video of him, the cable Scott in his shirt, right? I show that all the time. Scott Kelly with his cables. Yeah, it's my channel is also there, but they try to do a flip to 5 or 6 of these guys clowns at the same time, then they get entangled in their wires. Yeah, it's probably in some of the videos there on the right, Scott Kelly's wires and the reset button. Then the guy presses the button, the guy in red, after they get entangled in and they do all this thing, and then they cannot reset their cables. They'll get caught. And now the guy in red is going to press a button on the wall and he's going to make a noise and he's going to pull on to Kelly's shirt on the left, in the top left. There. You can clearly see the cable moving. And the guy pressing the button, and there's a clang. I cannot hear you.
Well, I was just thinking, wow, and he's scratching at his back, you know, where it's at, too.
Yeah, he scratches his back right after the cable moves. Yeah. So they use augmented reality props that they can dress these guys on, the different, and I don't know if it's only the shirts or clocks. There's different things that they do. Sometimes they're falling on parabolic flights for some of the more complex. Yeah, I made it really close so you can see the mechanical movement that makes no sense. And the guy is trying to untangle the wires in the back, and yeah, that's when he presses the button. You can clearly see, and you see there's other time. Don Pettit presses a button as well after he does his karate kick.
What is your idea? Why are they not producing higher quality stuff? Or, you know, you could like buffer it for 5 minutes, and if you have talented artists in the fast, you know, you could do all kind of things much better. It's so badly done.
I think it's good enough for what they do, apparently.
For the target group, it suffices.
You don't want it to be too interesting.
I believe it.
You know what I mean?
People
Otherwise
believe
you'd be
it.
watching it all the time if you had
The
it.
spacewalks are the most
engaging.
ridiculous. They have so many mistakes over the years, and they do absolutely nothing. They just sit there holding something, or they pull a wire, or they turn a screw. They don't do anything in the spacewalks. It's amazing. Now there's been a video that I saw today that they say there was a leak outside Soyuz. It's the most ridiculous. Like they're using that kind of particle CGI. They've done everything with space. One of their formulas is like,
that the one you showed there where they used like a band-aid or something to put over? No? And some plastic? Yeah, isn't I'm not sure where I saw this, but that someone was saying they're just using some tape or something, like.
Yeah, they say that one astronaut plugged the hole in the International Space Station with his finger, and then they put some epoxy on it.
Just like that Dutch boy. That's
Yeah, just
awesome.
like the Dutch boy. But this is a German guy. I was thinking it would be the Dutch boy. But yeah, they also found leaks by floating tea leaves. That's one of the most creative sort of stories that they come up with. Yeah,
Wow.
the moon shit is just atrocious, man. Like, how can people believe the moon landings nowadays, man? It looks so bad. Everything about it looks so bad. Like the flying over the moon, the things, their maneuvers, especially the maneuvers with the orbiter and the lander. That's just it's ridiculous. It looks like a film. Look at this thing. Like, you think this thing can fly? It's
Seems
serious.
vacuum proof, no problem. No, with the tin foil. Seems
You don't even fit
seems
in
pretty
it. Like,
good.
I don't think they can even change their clothes inside of it and pressurize it. It's completely ridiculous. Yeah, have you seen the Scott Henderson? That guy Scott Henderson. And if you look Scott Henderson, you're probably gonna find there's a guitar player as well, but it's not the guitar player. It's yeah. This guy is really good. They pick up on so much detail on the moonlight. They found out hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of problems. I did a little study recently with just the images of the Earth from the moon that they claimed that they took from Apollo 8 all the way to Apollo 17, and it's just completely ridiculous. The Earth never has a single continent on it in all those strips. It's completely covered in clouds. It has that kind of what they call the Terminator line, which is a problem because you don't see sunsets or sunrises. The ballers simply claim that you shouldn't be able to see it from space, period, for no particular reason. You shouldn't have sunsets or sunrise, all the colors in the sky that change.
Right. Was this it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's another one. What is what? Like, is it Australia there? What is that? Africa?
It's supposed to be Africa, but like you can't see Europe. It's just the perfect angle to miss everything. Yeah.
Yeah, like the weird clouds. Which ones are those? Yeah, those are other older ones. But if you look at the Apollo ones, Apollo 8, Apollo 9, the Earth rises. Yeah. I mean, those are even worse.
It just
The
gets worse
size-
and worse. Yeah. And it's just I wish I saw a line of them that were like all of the different ones that they've put out as actual photos of Earth for like 20 years, and that's where you really can see like just because there's so much difference between each picture and the
doesn't
quality
make
of the
sense,
CGI and the style of CGI they're using.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's amazing how we get bombarded with these balls for our whole lives, and the space junk and satellites is one of my favorite.
That is a good one because it's the
bullshit.
firmament. It'll help people understand the firmament eventually. They're like, oh, that's why we can't get out because we closed ourselves in. It was our fault. We did it.
You close it with satellites. Yeah, if you look
Yeah.
at the Starlink, there's a Starlink map that all the satellites that Elon Musk says that he puts around the Earth. It's absolutely ridiculous. Like,
So when you see like a train
like
of
that,
when you see Elon Musk, have you ever seen it like in the sky, like like the line of
No.
Elon Musk's? So
I
I
haven't seen
have. So what do you think that is? Like you see a bunch of like a train. He calls it a train, right? A satellite
yeah,
train.
you fly a train, like you fly. You have a drone with a bunch of lights hanging off of it on a sequence, and just fly over a place and promote it. Very easy. Or you make a high altitude drone or high altitude balloon with a string on it with a bunch of lights hanging off. You get the same kind of effect. You can do it with a bunch of balloons just to get it. Because what
Looks
they
like
say
this.
is
Yeah, this is what it looks
yeah,
like. It's
but
kind of
that
weird
doesn't
looking.
even look
Right?
like that doesn't even look like what the map says. The Starlink map says that they're all positioned in perfect distances from one another. You can click on the dot and it gives you when it was launched by SpaceX and the altitude and when it's going to fall in the ocean. because they can make all these disappear. They can just say that they fell in the Pacific
It just
Ocean.
seems like it's like it'd be really easy all of a sudden to get people comfortable with the idea of like moving stars that are all different directions. They're man-made satellites and they're a lot closer. And all of a sudden, there's an alien invasion by by demons that are dressed up in spacesuits. I don't know, whatever they can use this to get us used to it.
Yeah, I don't know if they can orchestrate some kind of alien invasion. I think they've already done it through the stories that they tell about aliens on the Earth, because there's plenty of people who believe that the aliens are already among us, that they've already come, that
Genetically modified super soldiers, man. Like they're probably just insectoid versions of us. Living underground.
Yeah, I mean the whole idea that what we had in also kind of science fiction that we have from transhumanists, the notion that DNA is the answer to everything. If you look at DNA, it's the book of life. It tells you nothing. It has nothing to do with how the body does what it does. It's a kind of code that's used to do many different functions, but it doesn't make you who you are. It's not that simple, and they don't know how it works. Like all of the science that there is around DNA, it's fraudulent, I think, by and large, and it's a huge weight.
I think it's a pretty messy
people.
thing. It depends how you look at it.
They're not going to be genetically modifying humans. They're going to make superhumans or X-Men. It's not going to happen. I don't think they can. They know.
Isn't the scarier question be, would they still meddle around and create entities that may be somewhat alive but not really viable life forms? I mean, all the hybrid ideas, which
you can make poison. They know how to do.
Maybe old.
They'd be able to make all kinds of poison, and they come up with lots of science fiction stories, like, what was the name of Venom, right? And special effects.
You've seen Morbius, right? Jared Leto. I mean, he's like a genetically he's a scientist or something, and he makes himself into a vampire, basically. There's more going on there. But the idea that you could use science and genetic modification, and I think he's even using something like Genome Compiler or whatever Twist Bioscience is calling it now.
Or but the CRISPR shit?
Yeah, well, there's a bunch of different CRISPR stuff. It's not all it's not all Cas9. It's not. There's a lot of Cas12 and Cas8, and there's different things.
It's so crazy.
But there is a lot of data. I mean, it's not maybe. I agree. It doesn't. You can't. It's not.
They can come up with as much data as there's like ACTG.
But there is a lot of useful stuff here. I mean, they can figure out like when promoter sequences turn on and turn off, and if you index billions of people, what's that?
What do you mean turn on and off? What do you want to turn on and off?
Promoter sequences in your DNA. Like, so throughout your day, everything that's happening, you're a big clockwork spring mechanism of DNA that's moving around. There's a lot of other things happening. I'm sure your spirit and geist and your mind and memories and your choices. But like, if your hormones aren't in order, then you can't sleep, or you sleep too much. I mean, these things do affect your.
But what does that have to do? They say they can turn on and off hormones with controlling genes.
Yeah, genes are in charge of a lot of that.
The problem is
all of that.
The problem, how that doesn't make sense, is that your body has trillions of cells, right?
Mm-hmm.
How are you gonna change? How are you gonna get to change a cell that's gonna then change all the other cells of your body? How fast?
Well, the main thing they want to do is they want teratogenic effects that affect your children, because they figure that the child will be born insectoid.
Your balls, essentially.
But even then, I think what's so interesting, a friend of mine recently released a book. We actually had him on the show, Starvation of Consciousness, about grain,
Mm-hmm.
and there's like 2 pages of how many interactions of molecules or whatever can happen within the body, and it's like 2-3 pages full just of numbers. That's how many there are. So I think oftentimes just look at modern medicine. If we apply these overly simplistic models, I mean, we're gonna be mapping for a long time, and could probably be much more effective looking at some ancient medicinal texts.
They get a lot of money. They get to make
infinite. It's like a money-making machine and laundering machine for sure.
That's the idea. That you could go as slowly.
Well, there are some pretty interesting little things. So, for instance,
I'm not saying everybody. I'm just saying I'm sure there's a portion of it.
It's all stats.
BioCurious lab,
graphs, right?
GMO.
But say what do you say that they can say about your genome? Like,
for instance, they did a thing where we did a thing in a lab where we took DNA from a phosphorus jellyfish and put it into the DNA of of a seaweed plant, and so we basically made a glowing lamp that was like a tube with seaweed algae in it that just it had phosphorus jelly. So you can put and that's a big one. That's the most popular, really, is using markers, using
but I heard of
phosphorus
this
markers.
but I heard of this when I was in high school.
Right, yeah. I mean, but that's so with the libraries, right? Where I put the library thing, with the libraries, they're able to see like what the effects are happening to many people.
You can make your hand glow.
Well, no, so it's not like, I mean, okay, so theoretically, long term, you could select which parts of what does what. But right now, it's super haphazard to just change, sweeping like, let's say you want to have blue hair. You're going to have blue hair all over your body, and probably your skin's going to be blue, and it's going to make everything blue if you were to do that. So it's not as selective yet, although theoretically, it should be possible to be selective because we have hair that grows differently in different parts of our body. So if we understand how the different things are, all the different mechanisms are working, then yeah, those things could be changed. And there are ways that you could do adenoviral auto mutation. So you could do a carcinogenic mutation to yourself, but that's more complicated and would cause possibly cancer and all kinds. Cancer is a serious concern. So the next one is that they do it to your kids. You don't notice the changes to your next generation.
Think about it. Do we need anything like this?
Why do we have to talk about this even?
Well, I mean, because it's happening. I think that's the thing. People forget. People forget that it's like the Gattaca's all around us. That there are islands with super soldiers, right? The super soldier, France, China. Right now, as we speak, there are biologically engineered super soldiers growing on islands that are maybe 20 years old, run by the French and the Chinese, and they say it's because the U.S. military and the British are doing it too. So the idea that this isn't happening and this is hypothetical, we're just beyond that. We have to start to accept that we're meeting probably these people.
Well, we have to figure out exactly what they need by biologically engineered. It could be that they're being harmonized or given some kind of cocktails, just kind of like how they do, how you see in Brave New World, like in that book.
Yeah, I mean, we could always best case scenario, downplay it, but other way to look at it is like, what's the worst that could be happening? And
what do you think they're going to do? They're going to unleash these people in the population?
So I think it's twofold. One, you've got these complete societies you will never see, which are these islands. There are islands that are already filled with genetically modified next generation stock of cattle. That's the next Vacus. That's what they're going to replace a lot of humans with. People that are either more submissive and strong at the same time, or really smart and weaker, right?
So it is basically Brave New World cookbook,
right?
Or playbook, because that's what they're doing there. They get the babies, and then they give them different concoctions, different regimes, different injections, in order to make them alpha, beta, gamma, delta, epsilon, so on, and be ranked and be put in positions. So and be inferior, superior.
I think that's when I hear about the insectoid thing. So talking to Cynthia Sue Larson and some of the people that go like really far out, the idea that we think of as aliens are really just genetically modified humans on another timeline, and that maybe they're living underground.
Timeline.
Yeah, because if AI in the future is able to talk to us in the past, because computers are still on, that have been on for a century, and they have transceiver points, then the entire CERN internet system, right? CERN internet.
So in the CERN, they're connecting to future computers.
Right. So the original internet was made for CERN by CERN, right? And so they actually have the original internet online. You can still use it. They rebuilt the project. Let me see if I can find it. Use CERN's browser. But the point is that because of that, they're able to send. Now you can browse like it's 1990. It's got to be right here. Where's the link? Available online. Okay, so basically with this, you can take old systems like the Next systems that Steve Jobs built that were like $10,000 in the 80s that could access HTML, and you can load documents from the future and send them back. And so you can, and they've been doing this. They've been sending back GitHub repositories through HTML. And so this is a full-fledged operating system from the 80s, right? That is web-based, that our entire World Wide Web is built on. And that's the window, that's the veil, that's the telepathy that they're using. That's the scientific telepathy, their way of communicating beyond the gate.
But they are not claiming right now that they're actually receiving something from the
No,
future
no.
in this
CERN's not.
present.
CERN,
So
of
they're
course,
just
would
saying
never say such a thing.
theoretically by yeah, sure. But yeah.
Right,
Mhm.
right.
Yeah,
But
I don't know. I don't
But
know.
the way that it would work that's interesting is so many of these things that we think of as being super foreign or alien are not. They're just part of us in different ways, whatever that means, you know.
Well, I mean, these old stories, again, like in the ancient mythologies, you don't have just humans
Right.
and animals. You have other creatures. You have all kinds of other creatures that inhabit the same world. There's giants and different kinds of giants, and yeah, animals. They're kind of the stellium style, Montgo style elephants. Um, but yeah, I don't know. We don't know. Like we're locked in some kind of small part of what seems to be out there. For me, I don't think we're self-contained as the only place in
Right.
the universe. But there's definitely something people know more than we do about this, because we have not been able to go to. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, thoughts on the other islands? They say that there's more
yeah,
lands.
yeah, I mean, people make a lot of the different models saying that there are other parts, but with measurements in that they're given in the Mahabharata and other places for the Earth, it's very much way bigger than the realm is way bigger than what we have here. And there's many different levels as well, um, up and down. So the cosmologies are very rich.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
here
the
we don't
idea
know.
that
Like, I mean, I'm totally open. For instance, there was that guy, Hervé Riboni, I think is his name, who sailed around the Earth on a sailing ship, and he explains how they created this doctrine of magnetic declination to drive boats away from back towards the north.
who's
It's like
this? Neboni?
Hervé Riboni. Yeah, I think he's in the Taboo. If you go to the Taboo Conspiracy channel on YouTube, you see his presentation. He's I think it's French or Swiss. He's someone who was in one of those sailing competitions that
How am
go
I
around
spelling
the whole
Bony?
world.
Bone
Now
or
you're gonna see, if you go to videos, it's gonna no. Let's go to video Bony. Yeah, it's like that. The magnetic declination is the last video.
this one? Okay.
Yeah, this is one of the videos. You don't have to listen. It's gonna take a while, but
Riboni. Okay.
what he's saying here, go back to the first map. I can explain kind of. Yeah, so what you see on top is a so-called magnetic declination map, and what he's arguing here is that when you're on a ship, you look at your heading, you look at the normal compass that's always going to point to the north, and then you look at a chart and you see if you're within any of these lines, see the blue lines or the red lines, anywhere you are, you have to change your course, add degrees more or less to one way or another, depending on where you are. So you're not following it's you're heading plus or minus whatever is the magnetic declination. He's saying this is made to confuse people in order to hide the true shape of the world and make it
Right.
seem like it's in a ball as well. And there's other reasons why he believes that there's a problem when you get into, say, this area between. So when you're sailing between Africa and South America, there, and you're going, say, east towards Africa, the magnetic declination is always going to try to get you to go north. It's going to pull you north, more north, almost like pulling you away from going between South America and towards the south in a straight line. You cannot go beyond 60 south. They don't let you do it. So that's a problem, because I live, and this is another problem, right, with the Earth itself. I live at 60 north before in the Shetland Islands. In 60 north, you have vegetation, you have animals, and you know it doesn't freeze hell over. But at 60 south, there's nothing. It's just total barren. It's completely different, and it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. If you're in a ball, it shouldn't be like that. The south, of course, gets to be even the flat earthers from the 19th century, they already had the early 20th century, they already had the answer to prove whether or not in a ball. All you have to do is have an airplane at the equator, an airplane at the Tropic of Capricorn and at the Tropic of Cancer, going around and see if the tropics have the same distance. And if you take the same time to go around the whole thing, which you don't, that's the problem. When the farther south you go, the farther things get. That's why all the plane routes go towards the center in order to cross the world, and which is something I've done as well. I've been from Canada, from Vancouver, Canada to Glasgow in like 8 hours, which seems to be the other side of the world where you just go north. It takes kind of a northern route.
It is interesting.
There is something beyond. There must be something beyond, and there must be people who know about it. That's what I think. But not this. This nobody
map,
believes this.
Take a look at the UN logo, and then I'm like, what is this? Plantation. I sense plantation.
I love the really silly flat Earth maps, though. I mean, they're fun. This is great. Look at that. That's amazing.
Yeah, floating in heaven. Yeah, the Chinese did think that the Earth was somehow square, with the dome being round, square with a circle. And they created the best mapping system of the land through this notion, apparently, according to that book that I mentioned before.
Shameful asks, I wonder the winter solstice will be later than the 21st since the northern magnetic pole is headed towards U.S. through Canada 5 miles a week. I don't know. Do you know anything about this?
I don't know about this. Yeah, I don't know about this. There's lots of talk about the changing of so-called magnetic north in positions, and which is, I don't know, if it changed so much, I don't know. I just haven't seen the evidence for this. Usually it comes in forms of graphs or those two-dimensional models or science, so-called sciencey maps on top of a ball Earth. Maybe even it's hard to know how the so-called magnetics of the Earth itself, how it's measured. I'm very skeptical that we can even, but I have to look into it more before I can make up my mind. But I'm not sure. I've been hearing stories. There's all kinds of boogeyman stories, like asteroids falling from space, and also inversions of the Earth.
Have you heard the most recent thing I heard just now in some short video great news channel? They said they just developed a way to shoot down incoming asteroids and protect the Earth, So just what you're talking about.
I hope they use volcanoes to do it.
NASA did the ridiculous DART mission, right?
Exactly this, yeah.
Yeah, we covered this. We made a lot of fun of it when we saw the whole thing live. It was absolutely ridiculous. Also, the evidence that they claimed.
Yeah, they did it better with Armageddon. You gotta stop remaking movies.
It's so bad.
That's
the NASA stuff is really low level. Like it makes you wonder what's going on. I was able to make a video that looked exactly the same. The video that they made of their, I think it's a Curiosity lander or Perseverance, whatever the hell it is, whichever it is, I'm not sure, making a video of a eclipse of the sun by the moon Phobos of Mars, the alleged moon Phobos, which is like in the form of a potato. It's like a weird shape that they claim, ancient alien. Yeah, that's it. Ancient alien theorists claim it's a spaceship that's rotating around Mars, and
that's Pac-Man.
Yeah, Pac-Man. So when we look at the JPL video for this, Rob the Truth, one of the people that come on my channel, said, "Hey, this looks like a image of the sun from the Earth with a solar filter." I was like, interesting. So I got an image of the sun from the Earth, taken from the Earth in a solar filter, and I recreated the eclipse of Phobos, and it looks just the same. It looks almost the same. I didn't even stabilize I got from someone who was filming the sun with a P900 and a solar filter, and I used that video to create my eclipse of Phobos, and I created the exact same eclipse. Because they're so lazy, JPL especially. It's like, I don't think they do anything. I mean, they take the money. I'm not sure exactly. It's amazing they've been getting away with it again and again. The same little ceremony with the rockets turning into CGI, with the celebration and all the same script again and again and again and again. No real science at all anywhere. And the same claim, we know exactly what they're going to say, how they're going to behave. Also, it's amazing. So after looking at this for a while, I started, of course, comparing to the other, Chinese agencies. And you just realize it's just choreography theater. But I think I've been arguing as well that they need to come clean. What the hell is going on? How the hell why do we need this kind of control?
I watched I listened to the War of the Worlds radio broadcast recently, and if you've never done that, I highly recommend listening to the 1938.
Orson Welles?
Right. Have you heard this 1938 production?
No, I haven't heard it, but
super important. So in like New York and in California, eventually people realized it wasn't true, but a lot of the Midwest was convinced, and they told them in the radio that the martial law had been enforced, and a lot of people bought into the way it was presented. I'm pretty convinced that this was part of another if day to see how people would respond.
Absolutely,
some people will say it's about World War. Some people say it's about World War II. They're like, "Oh, well, we're preparing Americans for that."
What about what's going on with the clown that plays the piano with his dick? What's his name?
Biden? No, I'm just kidding.
No, the guy in Ukraine, right?
Zelensky.
Got the Oscars.
Oh, right.
Got the Oscars, right? What are they doing with this? Like, they realize that they can just basically invent any kind of story, and people will just buy it.
I like that we both knew that we were talking about politicians, and I think that's all that really matters. That's at the end of the day.
It's incredible what's going on now because of the mass media and the control they have over the internet and the people who are in power. It's incredible that they're so incompetent and stupid, I think, in many ways. Why do we still have poverty in the world? Does it make any sense that it's not a world of abundance for everybody? How can we live in scarcity in a world like this? Everything grows. We can have we throw away food. It's incredible. I just don't. This is one of the biggest issues for me. Is how is it that we allow for so much suffering in the world, people and animals, and they can do. There's people with power to change everything, and they don't. They continue to do the same shit. They continue to want to destroy the people and control the people. It's wild. It's just, for me, you do your whole life looking at this stuff, and you think anyone could come up with a system that is better than what we have, and yet nobody does. And the only way to do it actually is with some kind of fiction, right? You have to create the fiction. You have to create the world where things are different, because even that's the fictional. That's when fiction helps you think about how things could be. But people want the dystopian shit. I don't know. It's just so wild. Look at the black hole, right? It's the black hole that I'm not sure you're listening to the audio on this.
Right. I can't play it for some reason. The audio just doesn't work right on my Mac still. But guys, make sure you're subscribed to In Fiction with Rodrigo, and also go to Rodrigo's website, rodrigoferrarinunes.com, so you can get all of the videos, because some of the stuff's not on YouTube. A lot of the stuff actually is only on his site.
Yeah, some of the stuff got censored on YouTube. That video you're saying the video. Yeah, In Fiction We Trust is the name of my channel on YouTube now, but it's the name of the manuscript that I'm working on. So the book that I'm going through, editing it right now, which is kind of a major kind of enterprise. Like it's hard to. There's no real. There's no benefits to reap from the writing itself. It's not like I expect it to sell or anything like this, but I just want to have some kind of statement on.
You might be surprised. I feel like people are pretty interested in this stuff right now.
Now that people don't read so much anymore, and to make something really readable, you have to, I don't know. It just takes time. You hope for the best, I guess.
Put out an audio book of yourself reading the book; it'll all work out.
Yeah, I'm covering all kinds of stuff as well in that I can connect with this notion of believing fictions. It's kind of like when we were talking about theosophies in different groups, these orders that create these initiation steps for people to believe that they are ascending towards some kind of spiritual goal. For me, that the whole structure is a kind of fiction that it shows the power of fiction, that you believe in something. And is it bad? Is it necessarily bad? I don't know. Like maybe it works for some people. Is what they have to do, but it's not genuine. It's not. You know what I mean? It's like it's fun. I find it interesting that we come up with all.
They have to live in a
structures.
fake reality, in a structure that they have to maintain, and it eventually has to collapse unless they keep maintaining it and bringing in new people to maintain it. Yeah. It's brilliant. It's kind of brilliant.
Multi-level marketing
it works.
university.
But it works for these guys. It works in such a way that you get some of them to buy into it so much that they donate, right? It's kind of, they live off
because
Well, but maybe they live off the programming that's being created there as well. If you're really heavy industrialist, you thrive on university not teaching the really important stuff, obviously, right?
Right.
Well,
guys, I'm gonna have to get going pretty soon. Is there anything you want to make sure we cover before I send them off to your page again?
Well, thank you for having me. I didn't really prepare anything. We didn't talk about anything in particular. We talked about a bunch of stuff.
I think it's good though. Nice. We should do it again as it's a nice diving off point. The thing is, there's so much about just the way people look at the world that has to be deconstructed so that they can start to put together the patterns, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh well, this looks like that. Why didn't everyone see that? So it's huge. I thank you for bringing that to the table.
Yeah, I'm fascinated with this idea of fiction. In general, how is it that because I saw in the so-called flat Earth movement, quote unquote, and truther movement, how much of fantasy and bullshit makes its way into it, and actually you can even drive people apart. That people who can be skeptical about NASA and the shape of the world and rocket launches and some particular realm, a particular like milieu of things or category of things, they don't have what it takes to be critical of other areas. And I find that interesting because in everything that we do is tell stories. And to know which one's Santa Claus, it's a fantasy, not a fantasy, and then to that is already difficult because you marinate in fantasy. So, and to what extent should we even worry that people believe a fantasy if it may not hurt them, or if they want them, or if they like it? I don't know, because it's the other question of free will, which I think is important not to mess with people's minds. But we all being messed up with through the system from the very beginning,
right?
Which is beyond our control. When you go to school and when you watch movies and you see TV, it kind of is it or isn't, right? You buy the TV, you think you're gonna have choices, but actually you don't, right? That's the and with the internet, what we saw is that there is, the last thing I may say is that there is a power with people. That people can get together and start sharing things and changing things, but that as soon as they realized that was there, then they started turbocharge the internet to extract and control even more. So it's a kind of war.
I have a theory that the TV's not going to really go. They got rid of the Disney Channel. I get the feeling that all TVs, it'll not quite all disappear. There'll be 3 channels eventually. It'll all go back to 3 channels again.
Yeah, they used to be the way when I was a kid. The TV, it would be 11 p.m. and then they would have the end of
The
the
freaking
program.
flag. Yeah, and be like, and you're welcome for what we did for you. Good night. Go to work in the morning.
World Economic Forum banner. We know you're happy.
Have you seen that video, the Space Busters video on the germ theory? No, it's what is the name of it? There's a name that talks about that shows the subliminal messaging in that American video, the one that with the end of the day that they sing the anthem. Have you seen that?
Oh, I've not. No.
No, they have like with the lyrics of the anthem. Under the lyrics and between the lyrics, they're writing, "Believe the government, God, don't question anything."
Really?
And it's kind of like straight out of that film, the Soderbergh film. What was the name? The one of the glasses.
Oh, They Live.
They Live, yeah. So it's pretty wild. Like they go overboard in the
Closed
state. You're from
captioning, they put
California?
some weird stuff in there. Yeah, for sure. Right in the heart of the Hollywood beast, right?
Yeah, I've lived there. We should talk a little bit about that some other time. I've been in Orange County and up and down the coast. I lived in Encinitas at some point.
Oh, nice. Yeah, Encinitas. That's more close to San Diego, right?
Yeah, close to San Diego.
Yeah, beautiful place.
And also in Van Nuys. We spent some time in Van Nuys, so that's north of LA, I guess, right?
Yeah, it's an interesting area because you have a lot of these old families that have been there since before it was America, and I think a lot of them still have power. And then you got places like Irving, where like Irving made a town and it's like rented out to the university, and his family are still making tons of money off of owning a county, basically. So it's a wild place, and yeah, you can see why the techno-randists like it, because they're like, oh, we could just build a new world and get rid of all the old ways here. So there's a little bit of both. Like some people want to destroy the system, and other people want to destroy the world. I think it's you might see two at the same cafeteria.
Yeah, LA is just the worst traffic in the world. It's very flat as well. It's super flat, and the industrial areas.
200 miles wide and an inch deep. It's that flat. Yeah,
it's wild. It's so crazy, and the wind can burn. Just something I learned in California.
Yeah, it's horrifying. Oh man, yeah. Last time I was in California, man, the fires. I was like racing from the airport into the fires, trying to get to my house. I was like, this is a weird time to arrive. Yeah, welcome to California. Well, yeah, let's definitely do something soon, man. Let's set something up for maybe after Christmas or New Year's. Let's do another show, and we'll talk about different places we've been around the world and some of the history to them, amongst other things. That sounds good.
All right. Thank you, Andres, and thank you, Rafa. Thank you so much. And
thank you, guys.
Thank you for having me.
Obrigado.
Bye-bye. See you.
See you soon.
Cheers.
Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarians.
Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians.
Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarians.
Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians.